if your mindset is just about ticking boxes and keeping regulators happy, what about your customer and your client? Okay.
Right.
What about your staff and their performance, mental health, motivation, and engagement?
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
That just gets us going. So what I'll do is just introduce kind of really briefly. You've given me some questions to ask. I suspect we'll go 30-ish minutes, 45. We'll see where the conversation goes. The context of this podcast, we call it the Value Factory. And the intended audience is kind of two people groups. One would be actually guys just like you, that founders of companies, owners of companies looking to grow and increase value. And then a group of advisors that would work with and for you in helping you solve problems. So anything that we want to talk about connected to your experience as an entrepreneur is totally on inbounds. And then how you serve other companies in particularly in the framework of Presilience, so that they preserve and enhance the value of their companies. So you kind of fit two of these people groups, and it's going to be really cool.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And I guess the one challenge you and I are going to have is 30 minutes will be too short. So
yes, it will.
When you're ready for the loop back in part 2, just let me know.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, I'm going to dive in. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to another edition of the Value Factory. Now, I'm joined today by Dr. Gav Schneider. I get that right? Gav, or do we go by Gavriel?
Gav is good because we're friends, Nick.
I appreciate that, because that's how we were introduced. So, Dr. Schneider, Gav is here with us today. First, I have to ask, where are you joining us from in the world today?
So believe it or not, and you know my travel routine a little bit, I'm actually home in Brisbane and calling in from my home office, which I'm very rarely at these days, but nice to be home for a little.
Awesome. So Gav is, he is the author of this book, Presilience, which we will get into momentarily. But Gav has a really interesting background and career that I hope we'll get into, and even some of your life story beginning at the age of 5. Now, we met when you were on your book tour for Presilience here in the US, had a lovely dinner, just got to talking about life and hardly talked about business at all. And then we followed up with another conversation about business. And here we are to continue that conversation. So thanks for being here. Thanks for joining from halfway around the world, quite literally.
Thanks for having me, Nick. And any opportunity to talk to entrepreneurs or people who want to help entrepreneurs do better is an opportunity that I'm very grateful to take advantage of. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Awesome. Well, let's kick it right off. Let's talk Presilience. Now, when you titled your book Presilience, How to Navigate Risk, Embrace Opportunity, and Build Resilience. And this is available, through every major book retailer. What is the Presilience method, and maybe most, what makes it so important right now?
Great. So conventional approaches to risk, leadership, and high performance tend to be very focused on two concepts. One, we have a high degree of control, and two, we have a high degree of certainty. If you look at our current operating context, we have very little of either. We have very little control and very little certainty. So most business owners and leaders are finding this a very tough and frustrating time to navigate. It's hard to set 3 to 5 year strategic plans. It's hard to implement anything that takes more than 5 minutes because things have changed as you start to implement. So we're actually now in a phase where we're sort of moving from disruption to disruption as opposed to steady state business as usual. And that requires a different way of thinking, a different way of making decisions, where conventional management approaches are often too slow, too bureaucratic, and too cumbersome to be able to take
Mm.
advantage of opportunity. So the Presilience concept, it builds on two key ideas. One, compliance. If I don't have compliance, you might make a lot of money, but you also might land up in jail. So we need to make sure we can at least tick the boxes. COVID showed almost every business owner and operator that we have to think about resilience. We have to think about a disruption hitting our business and what does that do to cash flow, people's mental health, etc. The challenge we found is that focusing on compliance and focusing on resilience are great in theory, but you can't comply your way to business success. And equally, if I'm going from one disruption to the next, focusing on my resilience, I can get through whatever you throw at me, eventually you'll break, or you're then stuck in a reactive cycle where you're just reacting to what's happening. So you can't capitalize. So the birth of Presilience was really based on 10 years of postgraduate research where I taught a postgrad program in the psychology of risk. And we kept looking at those leaders who are nailing things, who are really doing well. What are they doing that is slightly different to the norm? Because almost every leader in some way, shape, or form would have learned basic business management. They would have learned how to set goals, achieve objectives by aligning resources to meet, the requirements to achieve those goals, and then get frustrated when in practice this doesn't work. So the Presilience piece is really four things in practice. One, it's a set of tools. Two, it's a mindset. Three, it's a framework that helps you glue things together. And four, if you do it right, it creates a sustainable, high-performing culture that enables you to perform really well during business as usual, but actually turn disruption into opportunity. So in a nutshell, that's really what it is if you get it right.
So much in there. Obviously, that's why you wrote a book about it. Okay. So now, so I grew up in banking. That's my professional background, my upbringing. And when you say compliance means that has a very distinct, like I know Rhonda Morris, my compliance officer, right? But when you're speaking of compliance and resilience and holding these two concepts, like I want to go a little further into that if we can, because for me, the framework of compliance is the antithesis of, let's say, ingenuity, and ingenuity to me is synonymous on some level with resilience. Like if I'm going to stay in the fight, if I'm going to get back up and go another round after I get knocked down, I'd better do something different than I did the first time. But I also have to, so I have to comply. So help me through this. Help me make it make sense.
Interesting, Nick. And I'm very grateful that you framed the question that way, because it actually demonstrates the confusion that most business leaders today face. They're like, I have limited resources, I have limited time, I have limited money, I have limited capacity and skills within my team. What do I do that will get me the best return? And depending on your, and this is really important, it does depend on your operating context. Different jurisdictions require different levels of compliance, but it's interesting. So I grew up and had my first business in South Africa, which arguably is about as loose as you get when it comes to compliance. There are many, many, many rules, but there are many ways around those rules and ways of applying those rules that make it friendly to business if you know how. I then moved to Australia about 20 years ago, which if you want to find any sort of structure in Australia that is entrepreneurial, it's hard to find because the compliance mindset is so strong and the perception that we can regulate everything is really, really strong. So there are rules for everything, literally everything, and consequences for almost everything, to the point that I firmly have come to the conclusion in Australia, there's actually no such thing as a startup business. Because to be a startup business, you already have to meet all these compliance requirements. You already have to, have your $20 million in public liability insurance, your $10 million professional indemnity. You already need to make sure you've got ISO accreditations, for example, because most decision makers are so risk averse here, they need to make sure they've covered off before they appoint you. So the challenge with that is you can't comply your way to high performance. You can comply your way to ticking the box that a regulator wants you to tick. So if you get stuck, and your point around banking is really powerful. I was interviewed on a pretty famous podcast here a few years ago, and we were having exactly this discussion. And the interviewer made a comment, well, we just had a banking compliance expert in, and they mentioned that they've got roughly 7,200 compliance requirements just to be an Australian bank. We can't ignore compliance. But here's the challenge, right? And we'll shift into resilience shortly. If your mindset is just about ticking boxes and keeping regulators happy, what about your customer and your client? Okay?
Right.
What about your staff and their performance, mental health, motivation, and engagement? So we can do compliance in better ways. In other words, we can start thinking of ways to automate, innovate, plug technology in, align compliance outcomes to better outcomes. So this is where the intersection that I've seen done well between compliance and resilience can kick in. If our aim is not just to tick the box, but our aim is to have an organization that is resilient, that can take blows, first thing we have to realize is that compliance doesn't equal resilience. We have to realize that generally resilience is what comes into play when compliance fails. So I ticked all the boxes, but something still went wrong. So what do I do now?
Yeah.
So to your point, it shows your lived experience, Nick, and kudos to you, because when you started speaking about resilience, you actually straight away leapt to a presilience descriptor, being a robust ability to learn and adapt. So part of the challenge, and I landed up doing several keynotes for the Global Business Continuity Institute through COVID. And the brief I kept getting from them was like, our people, business continuity experts, are generally the people whose job it is to make sure that if something goes wrong, your business keeps going.
Right.
Okay? So that, and the brief was, they are so confused. Who owns resilience? Does the CFO own financial resilience? Does the human resource officer own human resilience? Does your IT department own cyber resilience? Does the CEO and the board own overall resilience? And the truth of this is, and we've lost sight of this in many ways, you cannot have a resilient team or organization without resilient people. Right? So I'm sure many of your listeners will recall when I went to business school 20, 30 years ago. It seems like a long time ago now. We were taught that, the best system you can build is a system that's not dependent at all on people, and that we can plug and play people in and out of the system as required. Right. And then you get to the real world and you actually go, well, that does work if I have control and certainty. As soon as we take control and certainty out, you go, hold on a second, I'm totally dependent now on my people's problem solving, their agility, their ability to absorb information and make great decisions, on their ability to communicate those things out, the ability for them to do stuff and to keep learning. So those attributes that I just described form the basis for the Presilience mindset. So what we found that once you focus on resilience, just think of the phonetics, right? Resilience, react, respond, recover. And initially we thought, and I'm going back almost 10 years now, when we came up with the idea of Presilience, it was originally more, how do we get more proactive resilience? How do we get organizations and individuals to be thinking, left of bang, as very often described by ex-military personnel? How do we go before the attack, before the terrible thing? The problem we found with that alone is it's really hard to sell prevention, because most people don't think it'll happen to them, or if it has happened to them, they don't think it'll happen again.
Wow, you said something there that's, I want to hear you say it again. It's very hard to sell prevention.
It really is. So I've spent a career doing that, and I'll give you a few examples. So I started my first business as a specialized security risk training business in South Africa. We then crept into an integrated security solutions provider. And the amount of times, like, South Africa is a very dangerous place, but the amount of times, and this just became a standing joke in the office, somebody would phone and go, somebody wants to kill me, I need protection right now. And we had a standing operating procedure for us to go, well, if we haven't done a threat and risk assessment, I'm not sending my people into something where they could get killed without a bit of knowledge.
Wow. Yeah.
So we would send a minimum of 4 people. So that's, just think about it logically, right? 2 shifts, so 2 12-hour shifts. So I want 2 people per shift. And I need at least 2 people because we only have eyes in front of our heads. So I need someone to look behind. So a minimum of 4 people. And it just became fascinating that people would phone the office, go, I need protection, money's no object. And the second you say, okay, well, our standard package to kick off is X, they go, oh, can't I just get away with 1? And you sit there and go, like, literally within 5 seconds, somebody was going, the value of my life is immeasurable, I need help, to, oh no, the value of my life is 1 person, not 4, to look after me. So I became fascinated with decision making. I mean, another good example of that is we at one point we actually won a lot of really good support contracts. And at one point I had about 150 security managers, close protection officers working for us, a lot of them in corporates. And we came up with what we thought was a very smart motivational structure. And it basically went like this. If the guys attended weekly training, they could get an extra 5% on their salary. If they passed their quarterly assessments very well, so a metric score of above 80%, they get another 5%. And if their clients love them, they get another 5%. So just for meeting our internal compliance requirements and creating customer service, they could earn 15% extra. And we thought this was brilliant. Like, we used some very high level consultancies to help us put it together. Any of you who've run a business know that sometimes the best paper plans don't always translate into action. What landed up happening,
question. How many?
Well, to your point, what landed up happening over time is the people who were coming to training anyway just kept coming. So the incentive made no difference because they were intrinsically motivated and they wanted to be professionals. The other group, who we were trying to get to come and train and try and make sure they met a minimum standard, actually found that as long as they built very good rapport with their client, we couldn't fire them because the client would fight for them. And eventually we actually had to change our contracts, and we actually had to reserve the right to replace the operator should they not attend training or pass competency requirements. And we would still sometimes have to argue with clients to say it's in your safety interest to make sure this person passes those requirements. And they'd go, but we just want to keep them. And if you take them away, we'll cancel the contract. So, we learned a lot on the way, but long story short story, it was examples like that early on that sort of showed me we need to be better in the way we understand humans. We need to understand ourselves first, our people next, our organization after that, and then societally next. So one of the things we focused on Presilience is what we refer to as multi-level thinking. They're not a new concept. Lots of other leadership domains, even if we go back to Edward de Bono's, different hats, etc. The idea of being able to have different mindsets is important. The challenge we've got now, and the focus we put into it, is a continuous cycle of performance based on enhanced decision making. And that's where we've taken the world of risk and we've gone, stop making it about ticking and flicking boxes and having all these documents that provide CYA, cover your ass, but don't help your business at all. Let's make this a living thing where people at the top of your organization are connected to what's happening on the bottom. People on the bottom resonate with what's happening on the top. We're aligned in our goals, in our values, and in our performance criteria. And we have enough trust between us that we can tackle problems together. That's the human part, right? Then you've got the process part of, can we enable the humans to perform well using technology, using systems that are not overly cumbersome, but enable good outcomes. And more often than not, you'll see particularly organizations older than 30 years who were really built on industrial age type thinking. And it's not their fault. Like, they've had this legacy of, we were not digital natives. We were migrants into the digital world. Therefore, you've got all these processes, policies, systems that may not actually be fit for purpose, but nobody wants to get rid of them because it's too expensive or it's too hard. So,
or it doesn't make sense. The new paradigm is, like you say, not so many of us straddle that kind of new tech paradigm and the old analog, the digital versus analog, whereas maybe the next gen expects everything to be digital, but the systems they're stepping into haven't evolved. As you're talking through, I'm thinking of an example in the U.S. banking system a few years ago. Silicon Valley Bank failed, and there are many reasons that analysts and scholars have pointed to as to why they failed. Some of those reasons include they did not have a chief risk officer. They had a vacancy in that position, chief risk officer, for some period. If my memory is accurate, it was like 18 months. It doesn't matter how many months, it was a long time. They effectively, what they did was made some financial bets that didn't go well, although they were perceived to be risk-free bets. I'd go into the weeds on how this actually played out, but it put everybody to sleep. Let me dial it back. Some people will say that the regulators didn't do their job in managing this bank or regulating this bank. I had the opportunity in the last couple of weeks to tour around the Northwestern US through 5 states and talk to bankers about this. And I would say, if we rely on regulators to manage our companies for us, then we're abdicating our responsibility. We don't deserve to be in business. So it's the checking of the boxes. It's the compliance. If we believe that checklist and adhering to the 2,700 regulations or whatever it is, that's enough to keep us in business, let alone be profitable and delight our customers, then we're fooling ourselves and we don't deserve to be in business. And yet, we have to check all of those boxes. We can't not. Just like you had your employees, they had to be in compliance with your training programs. And yeah.
No, I love that, Nick, because you've given me such a nice segue to talk about the challenges that business leaders at every level are facing today. And let's just talk about a few things that you brought up there, which I think are really important. The first one is we've got 5 generations in the workplace today, right? We're the first group of humans to be working with that dimension, with hyperconnectivity and access to the world's information in our pockets. So
that's right.
The game has fundamentally changed. The problem we have right now, and this is the problem probably for the next 5 to 15 years, is exactly what you described. We've got this mix of old and new. And some of the new is not tested enough for us to go, wow, that's really solid, like certain parts of Gen AI. Some of the old is so old it doesn't work anymore, but it's still a comfort zone for people in the workplace. So the modern leader actually has to develop what we refer to as ambidextrous capability. You cannot just be good at one part of the business anymore. So in the old days, we'd kind of go, hey, if I'm a dynamic CEO that's inspirational and people want to follow me, then I need to get a really dry coup or CFO who really loves business operations to balance me out. Now that theory is fine in theory. In practice, things happen so quickly that we need to develop what we refer to as tactical capability. The ability to both be strategic and tactical simultaneously, or to be tactical and strategic simultaneously.
I love what you do with words, man. I love what you do with words.
We're trying, but Nick, to your point, for me, the words are irrelevant. It's, do people get it and use it? Because academic theory is wonderful.
Right.
In theory, if it's not adding value to your operation, to your decision making, and to your outcomes, then it's just noise. So part of the challenge today is I see this wonderful opportunity, and that's what we've tried to do with the Presilience book to start. Is to take robust academic rigor around high performance, risk, decision making, and resilience, put it into that toolbox, skill set, framework, mindset, and culture change tool, and go right now for the next 10 years or so. This is the skill set leaders need. This might change. We might find in 10 to 15 years from now, Gen AI has really done so well, quantum has done so well, that we are now back in a more stable and certain operating environment. But that's not going to happen without great leaders who are working on themselves, working on their teams, and looking bigger. And when I say looking bigger, that's not about the size or scale of a business. It's about what is the impact our business is making to me, to my people, and to the world. I know that might sound like I'm at a beauty pageant and I'm telling you what I stand for, but practically, we had a great discussion around purpose, you and I, when we caught up.
Yep.
And ultimately, you can make money, but if you go to jail because of non-compliance, or if your people hate you, ultimately, you'll probably land up at a later stage of your life going, I didn't do as well as I thought I could have, or I should have done this differently. So part of the Presilience view is don't miss opportunities. In order to not miss opportunities, we need readiness to capitalize on opportunities. And that readiness is multifaceted, right? And I'd ask your listeners, just think back to any one occasion where if you were that little bit more ready, you could have grabbed an opportunity. Whether it was asking that attractive person out, or whether it was changing the way you put a proposal in to win a job, or whether it was a tough conversation with one of your staff members, these things happen quickly and dynamically. The more prepared we are, not only can we manage downside because we have context, but we can grab upside. So my mission with Presilience is this combination of, let's stop being silly about the stuff that will really kill us and actually put a bit of effort into preventing those bad things from happening. But let's set up the right structures to grab opportunity and capitalize on that. So, whether you're an entrepreneur and an innovator, or whether you're an entrepreneur and an innovator, in other words, inside or outside the business, the world is changing so fast. The skill we really need is the ability to cope with change and thrive through change. And we don't really teach that. We just assume people pick that up by osmosis. So we wanted to build a system that helped develop that.
There's no class that I have been exposed to in any business school or otherwise that's a class on resilience, but it is the differentiator. I shared with you, I think when we were having dinner, this mantra that I developed some years ago: make time to prepare for a time when there is no time. And it's that, but what you're doing with the book, with the framework, is putting into actionable criteria, well, an actionable framework, the notion that the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That person that called and said, my life is being threatened, I need you to send somebody, maybe not 4 people, just 1, because that's where my budget is. Maybe if they had done some things to not attract the assassin to begin with, then that would be good. Now, I happen to know this about you, so I want to ask. Actually, there's 2 things. One, you talked about running a physical security company with 150 employees. I think that you've gone on to manage bigger teams and bigger companies where you've learned a lot of lessons. But at 5 years old, you were not managing anyone, but you were competitive in martial arts, or at least training in martial arts. So what are the lessons from that 5-year-old Gav that are informing Presilience today? That's something really curious to me.
Well, Nick, that's a great question, and I wish we had an hour to explore that, but let's go. So I've always loved business. If I look at the things that I love doing, even as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I was finding ways to make money. So I was selling popcorn at school, or me and my sister went into business. She bred hamsters, and I sold them to pet shops. There were always ways that we were hustling. But I was a very sickly child, and there were some doctors that said I'd never exercised my whole life. My folks enrolled me in karate when I was about 5, as you mentioned. To be honest, my first 3 or 4 years of martial arts training, I hated it. I wasn't good at it. My body wasn't coordinated. It wouldn't work the way I wanted it to. My sister, who was a natural athlete, would always outperform me, and it was very frustrating. But probably the number one thing I learned there was a little bit of grit and perseverance in the early phases. And that if you want something good, you have to work for it. These great things don't come just because I click my fingers and I want them to. And equally, if I fast forward, I'm 47 years old now. I've been training since I was 5. I've taught thousands of people. I've received so many honors in the martial arts. But I've really seen over that period, the people that come who are so naturally talented, their bodies just listen to everything they say. They are mesomorphs, so they have the perfect musculature, etc. Very rarely do they become very competent, good, and last, because they don't put the reps in to build the muscle memory, which means the skills won't work for them under stress. And I see the same with natural leaders and natural CEOs in some ways. They often land up focusing on charisma or focusing on, machinations that enable them to have early success, instead of developing a rounded capability to lead both in business as usual and in uncertainty. And I think one of the last pieces that martial arts has given me and continues to give me is I know for a fact that no matter how tough business gets, nobody is trying to stab me, punch me, take me to the ground, choke me out, etc. And if I can stay cool in those situations, why shouldn't I stay cool when somebody's trying to squeeze me for an extra margin, or I've got a little bit of a challenge with a staff member who may need, a bit of extra support? So, long story, short story, if you build the attributes, they are transferable and you can apply them in lots of parts of your life.
such a powerful notion that I'm not sure I've even recognized, that the physicality of martial arts and other things can give a person a level of confidence that can be carried forward, a level of security in oneself, right? Self-assuredness that, there's not a fist or a heel coming for my face right now. I'm going to be okay. I can handle a little bit of confrontation in the business.
Well, to your point, Nick, there was a study done that looked at female college students who undertook a bit of self-defense training. And they actually found that the vast majority of the students that undertook the training were not targeted as victims. And I've taught self-defense for a long time. You do not develop the skills to defend yourself in an afternoon. Otherwise, I've wasted 45 years of my life so far. But what's interesting is the perception that I can creates confidence. Confidence is one of the biggest benefits you can get in terms of deterrence. So if I'm walking around and I feel like I'm not a victim, whether I have the ability to defend myself or not, means I'm less likely to be selected as a victim because I look like a hard target. So a lot of that lends to this Presilience concept of going, hold on a second. Organizations that do really, really well through whatever gets thrown their way are organizations that invest tremendously in their people's abilities. They're organizations that look at alignment. So what's in it for the individual? What's in it for the team? What's in it for the org? What's in it for society? And how do I align those? And the challenge with that is that's not static, right? It's dynamic. They could have been aligned 10 minutes ago and now they're changed because somebody's having a bad day, clients changed their mind, internet's gone down, or, as we've seen now, geopolitical wars are impacting decisions. So the challenge we've got now is a term we coined called dynamic risk equilibrium, DRE. And one of my very clever staff members went, what do we want to do? We want to achieve the dream, dynamic risk equilibrium and enhanced management. Okay, so if you can get the dream right, what it actually does is it takes concepts like risk appetite and risk tolerance. So how much risk should I take and what would break me? And these things are not absolutes. They're a spectrum, right? And it creates a structure where your people can play safely within that spectrum and innovate and adapt, but not create so much vulnerability where the bank might go under, like your case example of Silicon Bank. So the hard part in the modern world is finding how entrepreneurial I need to be, how innovative I need to be, but how much backup and resilience do I need at the same time? So in actual fact, high performance in the modern world is a combination of how much Presilience mindset do I need? Because if I have too much, you could be too opportunity centric and take too many risks and have bad things happen. How much resilience do I need? In other words, how much spare cash, how much toughness, how much perseverance, how many spare resources, because there's a challenge there in budget and the affordability and the effort we put in there. And lastly, I can't ignore the compliance piece, but if I can get my mindset right, that compliance is the ticket to the game, not the game, then we can start to integrate these three mindsets and get high performance. Easy in theory, but we're finding really good success with executive and board level structures who, once they understand this and go, you have a limited bucket of 100%. How much of that are you putting into compliance? How much are you putting into resilience? How much are you putting into presilience? Now let's go back to your strategic plan and go, you want to implement these 5 things, but your whole mindset is compliance. So there'll be no change. So once you can see the disjoint between the mindset and the objectives, it's so much easier to align performance. So practically, and this is just a quick, easy takeaway for your listeners. Most humans die in first world countries from heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. How do we prevent heart disease, diabetes, and cancer? You eat well, you exercise, and you have proactive medical checkups. If we're not even going to spend time looking after our own risk, why do you think your organization and your business would be high performing? So if we're not even dealing with the number one things that would kill us as humans, why would we deal with the number one things that would enable our business to survive? So we need to change our mindset to integrate self, others, organization, society, because things happen too quick. And we don't have time to compartmentalize these things the way we used to. And I know there's a lot there.
Well, but what you just said is connected into something earlier that I've been keeping in my mind, which is I'll get the words wrong, but through training and through regular training and disciplined training, you've developed an instinct, that's my words, not yours, for a response under stress. And so, I think it was Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get in the ring and get punched in the mouth. And we can make beautiful spreadsheets, and we can write beautiful 5-year strategic plans with PowerPoints and flip charts and all of these things. But if we've not developed, and I think this is the framework that you speak to, that you teach to, Presilience, we've not developed the muscle memory to stay in it after, through adversity and so on, then there is no seeing the end of that 5-year strategic plan, because we default to those things that we when things get stressful, I break my diet and I don't go to the gym.
You nailed it, Nick. And I think the hard part is this stuff is not easy. It's also stuff that most leaders were not taught. In fact, very few people have actually been taught this stuff. So we built our own graduate certificate and graduate diploma to teach the tools, skills, and framework. The challenge we found in our business early on is, when I say early on, I'm going back about 8 or 9 years, when we got very excited about this human centricity and risk and resilience intersection. And we actually launched a full-blown culture change division to help develop risk culture in clients. And over time, we found some really fascinating things. Firstly, as an external party, we could not change the culture of a client. We could create the knowledge sharing, the dynamics, and support systems for them to change it themselves. But if they thought we were going to do it for them, it would fail. So we changed that very early on, and we went, this is a knowledge transfer coaching thing. This is not, you pay our consultants to embed and they do it for you, because they leave. And when they leave, what's left behind are the
Is it the leaders? Is it the leaders, or is it the collective body of the company? Great
question.
What must be true for the culture to change?
Love it. And that's a very important question, because conventionally, the old idea of cultural change was very lineal and very hierarchical, right? The top of the organization, so the board, the CEO, the exec team, decide something should be different. They issue an instruction and everybody should change, right? So that's the theory of it, when we have high control, high certainty. How rarely does that happen in most organizations? I would say very rarely, because particularly if you're an organization bigger than 150 people, and to your point, my organization is about 320 now. From an Australian perspective, we're a pretty decent sized, middle sized business. From a US perspective, we're still pretty small. But culturally, we're wired to work in tribes of roughly 8 people to 150. So as soon as you're starting to look at a bigger organization, you've got tribes of tribes, teams of teams.
Right.
And once that happens, it's incredibly difficult to get alignment. And most leaders forget that piece, and they go, well, I'm the boss. They should listen to me. Otherwise, I'll fire them. Forgetting the fact that sort of penalty very often demotivates people instead of motivates them, and actually creates a survival drive in people to go, I'm not safe here. So if I feel unsafe, either I'm going to go into my flight or fight mode and I'm not going to make great decisions, which is the point you brought up earlier, or I'm going to start looking for another job because I don't feel safe here. So one of the things we've got to remember is that a combination of variables is required for the sustainable high performance in business as usual and disruption. It's not one thing, because if it was one thing, you and I would be having this conversation on my yacht and we'd never, ever have to talk about any of this stuff ever again. It's a toolbox. It's a combination of variables, and it's about the application. So I'd urge your listeners just to think about a few things as we look at this stuff. So presilience as an outcome can't be achieved without having a few things in place first. One, a just culture. So just refers to fairness. If we don't have fairness, why would people want to stick around? Because they're fighting for their place in this ecosystem continuously. The second is learning and growth. If we don't have the ability, and you described it so beautifully early on in this conversation, and you linked it back to resilience. It's about, adaptation, finding the way forward. So resilience is about adaptation. Presilience is about innovation. So changing through resilience is slow and takes time. And usually we have to hurt a lot. changing through Presilience can be a quick epiphany, provided we've got the machinations in place to implement whatever that mindset shift is, which goes back to your point about preparation. And I always say, and I was on a webinar not so long ago with some really smart people. So I also am the regional president for the Institute of Strategic Risk Management for Australia and New Zealand. And I was on this strategic risk panel, which had a geophysicist and a leading urban design expert and a couple of leading tech experts. And it was so depressing because everyone was talking about everything's breaking. Like, we've built our cities wrong, and we've already got overpopulation. We've built our satellite networks wrong. Therefore, the next solar flare is going to take out our satellite connectivity. And it just went on with this. We've done all this bad stuff. And at the end of it, I was even feeling depressed. And you can see I'm a pretty upbeat guy most of the time. And the question came to me of, Gav, you talk about human centricity and blah, blah, blah. What do we do about all these things that are broken? Because they're so big. What can one individual do to fix these things? And my response is super simple. If you can't control the voice in your own head, what comes out of your mouth, and the actions that follow, what makes you think we're going to be able to tackle challenges like that? So it does come back to an individual ability first.
Yeah.
And if we work on ourselves and we then develop the ability to work on others, we start to cascade this out, and then we'll see robust change and enhanced decision-making. We've got, and this is a real call to action for anyone listening, we've got a real mess in the world today. If we just look at misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, if we look at the way, for example, politics and belief have created separation between humans, as opposed to us being able to just go, hold on a second, you're saying something different to me. Let me try and understand what you're saying and see if we can meet somewhere in the middle to get a better outcome. We can't even do that, right? People just land up screaming at each other when we have different beliefs or different ideas. So we've got a lot of growing up to do. And I think this needs to come from business leaders. If we're the exemplars, if we employ people, we are the ones who need to help drive decision-making, attitudes, and mental models. It's not our responsibility to teach people to be good people. It is our responsibility as an employer to try and make sure that they are safe, secure, and grow and contribute to our organization's outputs. They're not going to do that if we keep, excuse my French, beating the crap out of them, telling them how bad they are, and making them feel unsafe. All that does is drive survival mechanisms. So you'll see in the book, there's quite a big section on motivation, because if we don't get good at understanding our own motivation, the motivation of others, transition that into goal setting, we make bad decisions. So you can't teach high performance and good decision-making without goal setting and motivation. So we have so many pieces that need to intersect to get high performance going. I'd urge your listeners, instead of shying away from the stuff that seems soft and cuddly, think about how you can up your game if you are a very good operator already in terms of process, efficiency, structuring, and resource management. If you became somebody who could motivate humans as well and bring them with you on the journey, you can achieve really good things. So we need to move away from this binary, people are the problem, or people are everything, and go, no, how do we get things in balance to get sustainable high performance?
Man, that is brilliant, beautiful, a great place to either segue or pause. We've been talking for 45 minutes now. I think we need to do this again. We need to continue on because there's so many other questions that I want to ask you. But in this moment, kind of where I'm resting is as business leaders, what I heard you say, these aren't the words that you said, but what I heard you say is it's not necessarily our responsibility to make other people better, but it is our responsibility to make ourselves better. And in doing so, we find ways to motivate those whose lives we affect, and we can make the environment better for those people to then choose to do better themselves. And that's in an answer to the cultural question, is it top down? Is it bottom up? Is it everybody at the same time? There is an opportunity for leadership in there around creating the environment for people to want to step into their own self-improvement?
And to your point, let's segue back to the cultural change piece, because I think a few things are important. You highlighted the key piece of what is the one variable we can almost always control. It's our response to what happens around us. And if we haven't built that ability, we're leaving a lot on the table. But the second piece is, I mentioned the first way we did culture change, the old way, right? Command and control, issue an instruction, etc. Think about the world we live in now. It's now networked. In fact, most organizations are hyper networked. So people in different departments become friends. They share links on social media. They are not necessarily only connected based on the way we've set up our hierarchies. So that's good for us. If we want to get robust change, we can use the same methodology that's played out on social media. So how do social media superstars attract interest? They get followers and they share information, and then they feed their followers information to be able to access an audience.
Yep.
We can do that in our organizations. The challenge we've had at the moment is we keep thinking hierarchially. We go, if you're in this position, you must be the influencer. Where often people land up in positions because they're good at their job, or they didn't make mistakes. They might have zero influence other than the influence their job title gives them. So we need to move away from this idea that we only look for hierarchical leadership when it comes to influence, and look for your natural influences. And sometimes those are the most random people. They're the people who put up their hands to be the health and safety rep, or they're the person, who's always putting on the company parties. They're people who've been there a long time, and they're just the depository of organizational history. If we can get these people who other people listen to think and align with what we want to achieve, you can fast track this. So conventional change in a stuck organization takes 3 to 5 years. Non-conventional change can happen really quickly. And I'll give you a quick example. Coming out of COVID, like many businesses, my business got kicked around quite hard. We landed up being roughly 30 people, and revenue dropped tremendously to get to where we are now, which is more than 10 times in revenue with 320 people working for us. The only variable I focused on was applying Presilience within my business. All of the people who work for me at supervisory level received training in our tactical skills program, and our senior managers went on our graduate certificate, graduate diplomas. During COVID, I took my behavioral scientist and consulting team and I turned them inwards, to the point that when we came out, we were so opportunity ready that as these opportunities started to come our way, we were able to capitalize on them. The first one that came our way was the acquisition of a 120-person contract, which those 120 people were so frustrated, disgruntled, they'd been treated terribly. So it wasn't just buying a contract, it was actually a fixer-upper in every way, shape, or form. We hit our cultural change metrics within 6 months. We had budgeted 2 years. And when I say hit the metrics, that was people enjoyed working for us, they valued the business, they were advocates for the business, and they wanted to see us grow and improve continuously.
Those are amazing results, man.
So I know this stuff works because we're living experience to do it. The challenge that often organizations get wrong is they go, I only want to invest in stuff that will give me a direct ROI. And if you can't tell me what that ROI is right now, I'm not going to spend a cent on it. We go, yeah, that's fine. Here's 15 studies, and there's hundreds, that show you that an engaged workforce, a motivated workforce, an aligned workforce will give you productivity gains of 30 to 200%. But you find very often, the CFO or the COO type character sits there and goes, yes, but those were studies done in, social sciences. They weren't done by finance people. I've found over time, the best metrics are the ones that you can show people about their own organization. So if you're a leader and you want to start implementing this stuff, I'd say either pick the best part of your business and make it better. And then you can actually see, hold on a second, my people are happier, they're performing better, their decisions are better. This is what it's done to revenue and profitability. Or pick the worst and then go, right, if this is so bad, what do I do about it? And if I can get a little uplift, awesome. And then you start to get confidence. And once you've got that confidence, you can scale the change. So you can do this very quickly, but you do have to have the right leadership buy-in, which is that's one of the failures we've seen with this cultural change stuff. Very often it's driven by very motivated middle management, and they're not able to get the top of the food chain to properly buy into it, which means, you get almost to the end and it doesn't work. And I'll give you a
Yep.
lived example of that shortly to end off. But practically, this should be a living approach. So if we want to thrive in the world we're in now, it's not just a matter of set and forget. It's a matter of building the attributes that'll enable success as a continuous process, as opposed to, a once-off glory shot. And, what we found with one of the culture change projects we did do, which was a 3-year project with a regulated financial service provider. The methodology is a bit complex, but I'll give you a quick summary. Everybody should get everything. Impossible. Costs too much money. So everybody should get something. So every staff member with them, there were only about 700 or 800, received 2 training sessions, one on personal risk management, the next one on enhanced decision making. And that aligned back to the organization's objectives. Next phase was what we refer to as building the influencer and champion structure. I like to think of this as building a human firewall in an organization. So we have virtual firewalls that stop threats getting in. A human firewall not only stops threats getting in, but enables you to capitalize on opportunities and have a high-performing mindset within your organization. So there are lots of methodologies, but we picked about 70 people there. They received additional training, coaching, mentoring, and support in things like leadership, emotional intelligence, risk intelligence, communication skills, etc. We then went back to the executive team and went, right, everyone who works for you understands how to make a good decision, understands their reporting obligations, understands how this ties back to what you want to achieve and your core values. And you've now got 70 odd people, 10% of the population. It's a little bit low. It should have been 20%, who can be your mouthpiece out into your organization. The challenge we had there is the executive team changed over the 2 or 3 year period that Factor 1 was run. And not all of them understood what we were doing. So basically, we built them a human firewall that they never capitalized on, which is a real waste. So the big learning for us was, let's do it the other way. Let's spend more and more time with the executive and board leaders up front. Let's get them involved in the process of building the human firewall, because it's for them. It's for them to use to create high performance. And if they're not part of the process, they misunderstand. So interestingly enough, what we found is a lot of organizations want to cheat that system by just going, let's buy more software, let's plug AI into the system. You need both, right? You need the enablement factors and you need the human smarts to use them properly. And the more organizations focus just on the one, the more they leave their people behind. Either way, because if I've got very motivated people without the right resources, they become demotivated. If I've got a great infrastructure system and process with people who don't know how to use it, it doesn't work. So that's the kind of psychology we put in place. But to close that off, honestly, it comes with a mindset shift. And if the leadership changes their mindset and looks at things in a balanced way, which is not just pessimism, not just opportunity centrism, but a bit of a balance there around their core values and what the organization stands for, and they can attract people with a similar mindset, great things happen. When those things differ and we go, you're a number, you work from this and this time, and you do these 3 things, all we do is commoditize and make things transactional, which never turns people on, never motivates them. So if you want, don't get me wrong, you can have a very good mechanical type manufacturing business with that mindset. If you're not in a pure automation type business, which by the way, humans will be pushed out of anyway, they almost are, we've got to be investing in the human piece. So what is going to enable us to thrive through the next decade? Tech has already overtaken human capability. We need to bring human capability up to balance with tech. That's the mission.
It's a big mission, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you spending so much time with me today. We're going to have another conversation, that's for sure. Anyone who's interested, got to pick up the book Presilience and get it online anywhere. And Gav, thank you so much for hanging out, sharing your thoughts. If anybody wants to reach out to you directly or learn more about what you do professionally outside of the research work and the work that went into developing the book, how does someone reach you?
Thanks, Nick. LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to reach out directly to me. You can also check out drgavschneider.com for speaking engagements, and Risk to Solution with the numeral 2 is how you get hold of us, risktosolution.com, in terms of looking at our normal operations. Equally, for those of you who really want to get good at this stuff, we've created the Institute of Presilience and have various training programs that run through there regularly. So check those out, because Nick, you and I are not going to be able to change a an extensive number of people's mindsets quickly. We need many more Nicks and Gavs out there on the mission trying to change, help, and assist people. So the more we can educate, the better it is for everyone. Thanks.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, thank you again. And thanks everybody for listening in and hanging out with me and Dr. Gavriel Schneider, the author of Presilience, founder and CEO of Risk2 Solutions. You can find Gav on LinkedIn if you want to connect with him further. And well, we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone for listening.